right.
Yeah. Well, let's hear what you have for this week, AJ.
So I had an article that I found from the Shenandoah Valley Construction, I think it was like association. Anyway, it was the kind of a throwback to like something that I learned when I was in the construction trade. They talk about the magic construction triangle. Anyway, the construction triangle has 3 sides, and it's cost, quality, and time. So you can have two of them, but you can't have all 3. And so the article is kind of trying to expand on that and say, that you should strive to have good time, timing, and be responsive to your clients, but also try to come in under budget and keep costs down for both you and the client to maximize, the quality of your work. Kind of trying to say you could have all 3. And I was just kind of wanting to get your guys', I know it's something that I heard a long time ago, and it's like something that I guess it's like kind of folklore or in business, sort of, a kind of an expression that's thrown around quite a bit. But I had never heard it outside of construction. So I was curious if you guys thought that kind of carried over to other businesses.
I really think it does. Yeah, I think that it's interesting that it started out in construction, but it is such a universal concept because in every aspect of our lives, we're constantly choosing between these factors of like, how long is this going to take? How well can I do it? Or how much is it going to cost me? And so, yeah, it's a very general, universal rule, it seems, that would apply to, I can't think of an industry that doesn't have this apply to them in some way.
I think definitely, having grown up in the accounting and finance industry, it absolutely applies in that case in terms of all kinds of accounting services that are provided, whether it's tax returns or audits or consulting services like what we do at TCA. I mean, it's definitely there's those factors of cost, quality, and time have to be considered as trade-offs. And where's the focus, or where is your? I think of it as where is your market position? Where's your promise to your from a service perspective? Where's your promise to the client?
Right.
And I think what you were mentioning about the article, the suggestion that the goal is to just maximize all of them. Okay, but I think then your promise, if you think of that from my perspective as you're creating a market position about where you are in the triangle, what that tells me is that you're in the middle of the triangle. Right. So you're not outstanding on any one of those. You're kind of you're good at all 3. So, and I think there's a market position for that. There's the utility players in the market on whatever it is that is, they're kind of timely, but they're not the fastest. They're affordable, but they're not the cheapest, and they're not the most expensive. And the quality is decent, right? They're kind of middle of the road. And I think on all of those, because I think if what the article is not, in my view, is not being honest with itself about is the fact that you cannot be an all-star in all 3 of those for sure. That to me is ridiculous. Yeah.
The sort of the conventional wisdom I've always heard on this is that you can have 2, but you can't have 3. And I think that there are a lot of companies who focus on that. They say, I'm going to do these 2. But I think that it's possible to excel and be successful also focusing strictly on 1. I tried to think of an example. I think probably the first one that comes to mind would be Ferrari, in which that's a car company that's not focused on building something quick or building something that is low cost, but is strictly focused on quality, and that's what they believe sets them apart.
Right.
And that's their focus. But I think it is a lot more traditional to pick 2 and have a company that believes they can do both.
Right.
Or some version of all 3, like you were mentioning.
So do you think the only thing that you could excel at would be the quality? Like you're talking about quality then being the Ferrari having either eye appeal or like horsepower or engineering appeal quality sort of thing that you sell it on that. And that price and timeliness kind of, I guess, could you just sell on something be like if the quality wasn't that great and
sometimes the truth in business, in my opinion, is sometimes quality actually doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right. We always say, quality always matters, and I always deliver a quality product, and nobody goes to market and says the quality of our product kind of sucks, but nobody will say that, right? But the truth is that there are scenarios where the quality actually doesn't make much of a difference, and I think you have to think of it on a relative scale. So on any of these 3 things, it's not an absolute scale. It is, when we say quality doesn't matter, or quality is not that good, we mean in comparison to all the other players in the market.
Yeah.
So there's kind of like this minimum level of sufficiency, right?
Right.
And
Now, it's pretty low because the example I thought of for cost is the Dollar Tree or the dollar store, which is focused so much
there you
on
go.
cost. And
Right.
then when you think about the idea of quality, it's like there's something there, right? They don't just sell nothing, but I mean, it's pretty close.
Right. And I mean, I think we do see this in I've seen it in accounting services lately, where the focus is on a minimum kind of a what would be considered a satisfactory level of competence and performance because you've got compliance requirements, right? I mean,
Right.
Accountants can't just totally provide wrong answers and fill out forms completely incorrectly without having regulatory problems, right? So you kind of have this kind of minimum level of sufficiency, but there's been an effort within the accounting industry to focus on almost manufacturing principles of lean process and lean business processes in order to increase the throughput of accounting work more efficiently, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And in talking about this idea of lean process and lean and creating efficiencies, people completely ignore if it has any effect on quality, because to raise your hand and say, well, it could have an effect on quality is almost heresy, because it's like, well, are you accusing the accountant or the accounting firm or the CPA of sacrificing quality? And nobody wants to accuse their colleagues of that, or professionals of sacrificing quality. But I'll say for sure, if your focus is on lean process, you are not focused on quality. I mean, you can't be focused on both. By definition, you really cannot be focused on being at the top of your game at both. You can be at a level of sufficiency for quality and meet all your regulatory and compliance hurdles, but for sure you're not aiming to be the highest quality provider if you're aiming to be the leanest processed provider, right? And also, I mean, quality of service, if you're providing services in the technical realm, it's not just do you have the most knowledge or do you provide the best answers? It's also how responsive are you with your clients, and
don't be an asshole.
Yeah, right. And I mean, and not to build off that statement in this way,
No.
but I mean, part of the lean process thing that you see, like I'll just throw it out there. One of the things that is being preached in the accounting community is this idea that if you're doing a tax return or a schedule or a financial statement or something for a client, you should refuse to do any part of it until all the information comes in from that client.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, because that's how you make your process on your side the most efficient, right? Which is true. That is how you make your process more efficient. But it is not quality service for clients, right? And so, but that would be an example of where you have to ask the question of, does that market that you're dealing with there care about the quality? And it may be that they don't, right? It may be that there's enough of a market of people who don't care that the exact timeliness of or the exact schedule of getting things done with their accountants, for example, isn't as important as keeping a low fee that's efficient, which is built off efficiency. Yeah. So as long as the accounting firm can provide a low fee and have quality at a reasonable level there in terms of the right answer, then they're willing to sacrifice quality in terms of responsiveness and getting things done sooner rather than later, even if, right? I mean, what we're getting at is the client who wants something done sooner rather than later, but actually doesn't do their part to give the accountants the information, right? Which is classic. I mean, that's how many clients will operate if they can, because they've got demands and things going on their time, right? So they're going, so they may delay giving their accountants information, or they give their accountants part of the information early on, and then they give them the last piece of the information toward the end. And while it is no doubtedly more efficient for the accountant not to touch any of it till they get the last piece of information, it's not as good a service to the client if the client believes because they gave some of the information months before, at least half the project's already done, and it's not. That's
Right.
a service problem, right?
Well, and a lot of times you don't even know what you don't have until you get in there and start doing it and realize, okay, I actually needed this piece of information. And I think the other interesting thing is that it's a two-pronged approach, because you've got both the accountancy who's trying to figure out which two things they want to focus on and what their goals are and where they see themselves as a market leader. But then you also have the customer, who might have some customers believe that quality is of utmost importance and time becomes of utmost importance to people who are late in filing their tax returns and that sort of thing. So it's just this delicate balance of what the accountancy wants to do versus what the customer is trying to, what he values.
Yeah.
Right.
And the client may just want it to be timely and relatively cost effective, and the quality, the level of service and or the level of expertise being deployed may not mostly matter, because maybe the work involved doesn't actually require a high level of expertise in terms of that part of quality. I'm almost, as we're talking about this, I'm almost like splitting quality into two. It's almost like I've got a 4-part triangle, right? Because I'm like you've got
tie square.
Yeah, because you've got cost and you've got the cost and you've got the time. But then when you talk about quality, I think there's this trade-off between the perceived quality that is related to the service, right? Like how much service do you provide in terms of responsiveness and your ability to handle kind of last minute information coming at you, and being willing to work on it even in a format or in a way that's not super efficient for your business as the accountant. That's the service component, right? And that's one part of quality. But then the other part of quality is, do you actually know your shit?
Yeah.
And sometimes those two things are a trade-off from each other, right? Because what I often see is that a lot of accountants will win in the market, even though they don't know shit. They win because they provide a high level of service.
Right.
Yeah.
Probably more often than not, that's actually the case. Is that in professional services, is that providing a high level of the service piece that I was talking about actually means more than knowing your shit. But there are cases where the issues are so complex that having a high level of expertise actually outweighs the level of service. Like the accountants or the lawyers or whoever the professional service providers are, perhaps even the software developers or whoever they are, what they're doing and what they're dealing with is so complicated, and there's not that many people in that particular geography or market that can deal with it, that they can get away with a lower level of the other component of service, because even though maybe they're a little bit prickly, or maybe they don't, they don't, they're not as responsive, people still work with them because they're one of the few providers of that particular information or able to do that particular type of work. So I think there is kind of that trade-off there. It's like, well, if you don't want to provide a high level of responsiveness and customer service to your clients,
You better know your shit.
You better know your shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You better know your shit.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
And so it's like, everybody kind of disagrees on, or people can disagree on what they think quality means, but it's just really interesting when you get into the higher level of knowledge required for whatever service is being rendered, because it's like we can all look at it and say we think this is quality or we think this is quality, but that's only works if we understand the product or service that's being rendered. So if you're handed a tax return which you don't understand, and then you're trying to judge if this is more quality than some other tax return, that can be difficult for somebody to really know.
Yeah. Well, that's why I've always felt responsiveness always wins, because regardless of what a business or an entrepreneur understands about their accounting or the financials they get from their accountants or their tax returns, they know whether their accountant picked up the phone or not.
Yep.
This reminds me of like the whole basketball analogy, right? Like defense, right? Like Michael Jordan was supposed to be like, he felt best about his defense. Because even on an off night, right? You can have an off night on shooting. Shooting takes a little bit of skill. Defense doesn't take skill. It takes hustle. Anybody can play defense. Right. What they were talking about. They were always talking about the hustle play. And so I feel like not everybody can be like a genius in their field.
Yeah.
But you can be a nice person and be responsive.
Yeah,
like
and you can
that's the hustle.
Yeah.
You know, like that's the get off your ass and do something.
Yeah.
To respond to whoever's asking you a question, you know, or to whatever the request is.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's the way I think about it.
That makes sense. I think the only other thing I wanted to mention is just that I think a lot of people's opinion when we're talking about tax returns and like determining quality, I think a lot of times a business owner would say that the most quality return is the one which has the least amount of tax due at the end of it. And I just want to challenge that assertion because often that can come back to bite you. And I can just see that's how it often gets thought of.
Yeah. No, that's very true. And it's like trying to educate and make sure that business owners understand that it's not, it's both a question of, are you optimizing the tax result and are you protecting the company from risks? Are you protecting the company from risk exposure? Because it's not a real trick. There's no trick, I should say, and no skill involved in calculating that a company has zero tax by just not following the rules.
Yeah.
So we can make all kinds of expenses.
Yeah, we could do that.
You know?
Right. So, I mean, whenever a client comes to me and they're like, "Hey, we haven't been paying taxes all this time, so, you know, and
make it happen again this year."
Yeah, and we have a high level of risk tolerance, so we don't really care whether we follow the rules. It's like, okay, what am I going to do for you then?
Yeah.
Right? Because
I
can't.
You could just put bullshit numbers in the boxes too.
Right.
You know?
There's no tax due if you just don't write any of the numbers.
And then the best part is I don't sign the return. You know.
Right. So I mean that's specifically from the tax standpoint. But I mean, I think back to the triangle piece. I mean, if we accept that what we mean by quality 90% of the time, I think on your point that business owners, operators really don't necessarily know the quality of the accounting schedule they got in front of them per se, or the use of the accounting rules. They don't know the difference in quality between how one accountant utilized the rules versus how another accountant utilized the rules, probably the vast majority of time. So when they think of quality, they think about the service, the responsiveness and those sort of elements. You would like to think when you go back to that triangle that those of us who provide a higher level of service then can command a higher fee. That there's, you know, if you're putting on that triangle, quality as service, and you think of cost as value,
right?
That the higher the level of service, the higher the fee can be. That the client is willing, the businesses are willing to compromise on the fee because they realize they're getting a higher value for that level of service.
I think that was great, but I think you missed the biggest thing that we got out of this whole discussion is that Ty now has the Ty car square, much like the Ron Swanson triangle. Ty now has a square that we'll put up at the end of the video.
Yes,
and it's no longer the triangle construction; it's the Ty car square.
Yes, with two
different
qualities: expertise versus real service.
Yes,
excellent. Yeah,
he just didn't want anyone to make the pun triangle.
Okay. That's what we're going to end on. That's what we're going to end on. Is triangle.
Somebody. You guys weren't going to do it. I looked at you. You weren't doing it.
Oh my God! Turn the mics off now.
Yeah.
Especially Charlie's.
I would not have even thought of that. Wow.
And you're the only one drinking coffee.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yep. Yeah, that's true.
Like, that was somewhere in there.
Charlie can do all this without any assistance.
Yeah.
That's great. All right. Well, I want to thank you guys again for a good roundtable discussion. Good topics this week. Yeah, and thank our audience. Thank you for joining us. And please hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications so you can see when we're coming out. Like us and tell your friends and colleagues about us so we can continue growing this program and this community for you all. All right. We'll see you guys next time.